Do any of you guys have that buddy that's got that gun that he just won't get rid of? All he does is complain about it. He doesn't like it. He doesn't like this. He doesn't like that. But he just won't get rid of the damn thing. Yeah, that's me. Hey guys, Work here, welcome back to the bench. Today we are going to do something to a gun that I don't talk about a whole lot. And the reason that I don't talk about it a whole lot is because I don't like this gun a whole lot. The gun that I'm talking about is my Smith Wesson Shield. I have had this shield for quite a while now. Got it back when I was running M&Ps. I was running M&Ps because the local gun shop told me that I didn't want to run Desert Eagle Baby Eagles. So I got M&Ps, started off with an M&P compact, went into a full size, and somewhere along there I picked up my shield. This is a 9mm shield of the old school variety. This is before the improved trigger and anything like that. You can see that already I have done a little bit of stippling on here because the stock stippling on these things is terrible. It adds absolutely no grip to these things. But I still, even with that, hate this gun. And the reason that I hate this gun is right here, the trigger. The trigger on this gun is atrocious. You can see this gun has had a lot of rounds through it, and it is still extremely gritty. I don't know how well you can actually hear that, but it's pretty bad. I've always hated the cantilever design of their triggers. It just feels clunky to me. The trigger break is not rough, but it's just not... You can feel the plasticky to it. Let's go ahead and check really quick, see how much the trigger pull weight is. Yeah, I guess it's not that bad. It's right about 6 pounds. So it's a serviceable heavy, but I've just never liked the trigger profile of it. It's always been just kind of clunky to me. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be replacing the stock shield trigger with this. This is the Monarch trigger from Hyve. It is just the trigger shoe, but with just the trigger shoe, it is said to change the pull profile significantly. As you see here, we have gotten rid of the hinge trigger and we've gone to the dingus style trigger of Glocks and many other brands. And this apparently changes the geometries enough so that maybe I won't hate this gun so much. So first things first, let's go ahead and verify clear. And let's pull the slide off, the M&P slide. You pull all the way back, hit it to slide stop, pull this bar down 90 degrees. Go ahead and release the slide, pull the trigger, and the slide will come right off the front. Now they do have a method here of being able to remove the slide without pulling the trigger, but if you know that the gun is empty, then there's not a significant drawback to go ahead and just pulling the trigger. Next thing we need to do is we need to remove our takedown lever. To do that, we're going to rotate back to parallel with the barrel. Then we're going to rotate up slightly. We're going to go to about the 230 and just wiggle and pull on it, and it will pop right out. Let's go ahead and set that aside. Okay, so next thing we need to do is grab our block here, and we need to get this roll pin out. Let's go ahead and grab our punch set. Let's go ahead and grab our punch and get that out of here. Okay. And with that out, let's go ahead and pull our punch back out, sit our spring pin to the side, and from the other side then, go ahead and push our trigger pin out, going the other direction. And you can see here, as soon as I pop that out, you can see my punch down in this little groove down in here. It's actually holding the trigger spring, so that's going to come in handy later on. We're actually going to have to reinstall that and get that trigger spring pulled back up in here, but I will show you a trick for that when we get there. So for now, let's go ahead and pull our punch out, and you're going to hear the trigger spring go snap a little bit as it falls back and releases. Then we can pull our lock block out, and that's going to come out with our slide catch here. Okay, so from there we can go ahead and pull our trigger bar out. We'll pull the trigger up from the bottom. There we go. And so now we've got our trigger bar out. Now this is where the next bit of work is going to happen. So watch out for this spring here. This is our actual trigger spring. So we need to make sure that that is in the right position. And that is with this the opening in the spring is actually going to be on the top side. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this up a little bit, just the same way that I clean up my Glock triggers and everything. just a little 1000 grit sandpaper. The sides don't feel too bad, but the top over here at the safety plunger lever is pretty rough. So go ahead and grab some trusty 1000 grit and clean that up a little bit just to get any grit out of this thing. It's one of those things where you got it apart, might as well take care of it. That should do it there, and I don't think anything else is going to need cleaned up. So in addition to that, we've got this section back here. Now this is actually what integrates with the safety on my safety version here. There is a block that comes up to block the trigger bar from moving back using this. Now with the new trigger, because the new trigger pulls the trigger bar back slightly to reduce the reset, this is probably going to need to be filed off a little bit. We will get to that bridge when we get there to see just how much we're going to need to file. They say about 30 to 60 thousandths. So we'll probably go ahead and measure it, take off 30 thousandths, put it in the gun, and see if it works. But for now, let's go ahead and finish with this trigger here. So the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to drive this pin out right here in the trigger bar. Now, this is something that's very important, is this trigger is actually reused. This trigger is going to be reused in the Monarch trigger. It does not come with a roll pin. That really scared me when I first got it. I thought they'd forgotten a piece, but it doesn't come with a roll pin. We reused the stock pin. So let's go ahead and tap that stock pin out. Tap this pin out. And it is not in there tight at all. Okay, so we got that pin out, and our trigger bar and trigger are going to come right apart. We've got our pin down here. Remember, sit that aside, remember where it is, because we will be reusing that. While that's off, I'm actually going to clean up in here a little bit with, again, our 1000 grit, just to make sure everything is nice, clean, and smooth. Because internal, this is one of the spots that I notice people don't check a whole lot, but that trigger bar can add a lot of friction inside that trigger shoe that you are 100% gonna feel as you're pulling that thing back. Now obviously you're not going to notice it in fast fire or anything, but if you just gotten done with the trigger job and you're sitting there just pulling the trigger time after time after time, you're gonna notice that, and it's gonna drive you insane that you didn't fix it while you were in there. So just something that I typically think is better safe than sorry. Go ahead and clean up your surfaces. Okay, so now we gotta put our trigger bar back in our new trigger. So if you take these and you shove them all the way together, let's go ahead and get that spring kind of in the right place. Okay. So if you've got your trigger and your trigger bar and you get that trigger bar slid in there, if you slide that trigger bar all the way until it stops, you are definitely going to hit the bottom of that. And as long as you keep those tight like that, when you drive your pin in, you should be pretty well set to go ahead and just drive that through. So let's go ahead and grab our pin. So you've got our trigger bar, our pin, our trigger. Let's grab some needle nose pliers. Needle nose pliers with our pin. Let's go ahead and get our pin started. Okay, so we got our pin started in there. Make sure that our trigger bar is up tight. Let's go ahead and finish her off. So let's go ahead and get that flush. I actually had to swap to an aluminum block here for a little bit to get enough backing behind that to get this thing in there. And we want to make sure that it is flush on both sides. There we go. Okay. So now that we've got that in, let's see, goes in, that's good. Okay. So now that we've got our new trigger on, let's go ahead and clean up this back safety tab a little bit. So in rewatching some of the other videos, they said they actually took 60 thou off of this, so let's go ahead and start with 60. Let's get our calipers turned on. We are currently at 0.604, 605, somewhere in there. So let's go ahead and take this down to 0.545. We're just going to take a file and run this along the file and take off the material. Not really rocket science here. I did just lose my spring though. So let's check what we're at now. That wasn't much. Yeah, it was 4 thou. Okay, so I got a lot more to go. Good to know though. Okay. Let's check it now. Still not a whole lot. 576. 549. That is getting pretty close. Let's go ahead and set our big guy aside. Let's finish this up with the jeweler's file just to get all of the sharp edges off of here and get everything cleaned back up. Okay, so I think that's going to be enough. Let's go ahead and put our calipers away. Okay, so the next thing that we got to do is, once we get this whole thing in the gun, we've got to line the trigger spring, which you can see right there, up with this hole when we drive the pin through. So the way that we're going to do that is, we're going to get a bit of fishing line. Go ahead and grab yourself a heavy enough amount. Can't really have too much, you can't have too little though. So go ahead and grab your fishing line. Now you can't see this very well, but it's there. And I'm going to fish it through the loose end of my spring, if I can get it up and out of there. There we go. So I'm going to feed it through the loose end of my spring, pull it out, and we are just going to tie a very large loop on here. So 6-inch, 7-inch loop. So what we're going to do is we're going to end up pulling on this loop to get the spring lined up once it's in the gun. So you want something big enough that you can pull on, but you do not want it tied tight to the spring, because we're going to need to cut this off here in like 5 minutes or so. So with that, let's go ahead and drop the trigger in. Now this is not going to be the final fit for the trigger, but we're going to go ahead and drop the trigger in. We're going to put the safety side in first, then your trigger will drop down inside there, and we're going to kind of line it up and make sure that your safety turns on. The safety should be able to come up and be positively engaged with the trigger bar in there. So, verified that our modification here is enough to be able to clear the safety, and you can see here that I've got my fishing line tied inside my spring. What we're going to do is we're going to get everything in there, and once we're ready to put that pin in, we're going to pull on the fishing line and line that spring up. So before we get too much further, I do also want to grab another bit of 1000 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to clean up right down in the trigger well here. I did hear some issues of people who said that the trigger was still gritty, and they cleaned this up and it fixed it all up. So let's go ahead and clean that up just a little bit. Nothing too special, just enough to be able to smooth it out. Okay, so now we're on to reassembly. We've got our trigger here, and we've got this string here that we need to be able to pull forward on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our lock block here, and we're actually going to put the string in here in the lock block, in between here. So let's go ahead and put our fishing line through there. And that's just so that we can pull forward on it, but so that it doesn't get pinched up by anything later on. Now we can go ahead and put everything together. So let's make sure that you keep a hold of that string so you don't pull it back through our lock block. Let's go ahead and put our trigger in first. Again, on our trigger, we're going to put this back in first. That's going to go back and underneath this portion of the frame right here. So it's going to go back and back. I'm going to drop our trigger down. And now with our trigger seated, we can go ahead and take our locking block and push that down. And once that's down, you can look down through that hole, and you can see as I pull forward, see the spring line up as I pull on the fishing line. So we've got to get all three of those things lined up. Got to get our trigger, lock block, and spring lined up. And with those planets aligned, in theory, we should be able to push our trigger pin here right through. And of course, it's not going to work. Oh, there it goes. And there we can verify down inside here. Grab my light. We can verify down inside here that we did capture the spring on the pin, and the pin is all the way through. Okay, now that our pin's all the way in, we can go ahead and get rid of this string. So get whatever you want to use to cut that off, and go ahead and cut it. And it should pull right out. Shouldn't be pinched too hard on anything. Mine came right off. Now we can start admiring a little bit of our handiwork here. So now let's go ahead and put our roll pin back in. Let's grab an appropriate sized roll pin punch. I got one out. Somewhere, no I didn't. There we go. Okay, let's go ahead and toss this up here. Get this pin back in. sorry, I had to do that off camera. To punch these things in here on the bench is incredibly loud, so I take it down there on the floor. But so we got our roll pin punched back in. Now it's just a matter of putting everything back together. So let's go ahead and grab our takedown lever. We're gonna slide it back in the frame. Again, we're gonna be at about the 230 position here. With that back in, let's go ahead and rotate all the way down. Get our slide back on. Pull our slide back to slide stop. Flip our pin. And there we go. There is our new Monarch trigger in our shield. Let's go ahead and check for function. It works. Oh, it is nice and slick. Let's make sure the safety works. And it does. Safety is on and we have no fire, no bang. Safety off and click. Let's check our trigger pull weight. Shouldn't have changed it at all. But just to verify, let's go ahead and about 6.3, 6.4 pounds, which is well within margin of error for my crappy trigger pull gauge and a striker fire trigger. There you have it, guys. First impressions are very impressive. It is a really smooth, I mean, there is no take-up on that. Check that out. No take-up. And then a nice break on that. And check out this reset. Ready? Boop. Reset. Bang. Reset. I mean, for a striker trigger, for what this gun had in it before, this is awesome. I am actually excited to get this thing out and shoot it for the first time that I can remember. As I said, I'm not the biggest Shield fan, just merely because I don't like the triggers. Now, this is obviously a 1.0. The 2.0 has a considerably better trigger from what I understand, but that's then stock. I would say that the 2.0 probably does not have a better trigger than this. So that's it for this time, guys. Installation of the Monarch trigger from Hyve. Thus far, a really good way to highly improve your Smith Wesson Shield. I'll put a link to the Hyve trigger somewhere around here. Unfortunately, I can't put it in the description anymore, or else YouTube will flag me and they'll take all my money. Speaking of money, if you like what we do here and you feel like contributing a little bit, I do have a Patreon account. You'll find a link in the description below to that. Anything that I get from this, all the money that I get from YouTube goes right back into the projects that you guys see, including this trigger, which was purchased by money from this channel. So if you like this video or found it useful, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you're looking forward to any of our upcoming projects, go ahead and hit that notification bell. Remember, I appreciate every one of you, and until next time, do your research, get informed, and get to work.